Hello everyone, my name is Alex Mills and the title of the article I will be presenting today is Brain Activation and Connectivity and Anorexia Nervosa and Body Dysmorphic Disorder when Viewing Bodies, Relationship to Clinical Symptoms and Perception of Appearance. Alright, some terms to know. Anorexia nervosa is described as a person having low body mass and they are not worried about the consequences that low body mass may bring. These people believe that they must lose more weight. Body dysmorphic disorder is a mental health condition where a person is obsessed with a part of their appearance that they believe to be flawed. This imperfection that these people usually see are imagined or even so small that no one else notices it. In terms of the study, we will define functional connectivity as a measure of how different parts of the brain interact when doing a specific task. And brain activation is what parts of the brain are working or activated during a specific task. The study uses the terms normal spatial frequency, low spatial frequency, and high spatial frequency, and basically these mean the clarity of the pictures. I put examples on this slide, and you can see low spatial frequency, normal spatial frequency, and a high spatial frequency. And basically normal spatial frequency is unaltered, high spatial frequency is sharp and fine details, and low spatial frequency is blurry, so you can just really make out the shape. And also, I will be using abbreviations, AN for anorexia nervosa, BDD for body dysmorphic disorder, and LSF, NSF, and HSF for the spatial frequency. Alright, so the three networks of focus is the study compares in terms of connectivity and activity are the dorsal visual network, the parietal network, including the inferior parietal lobule, and the striatal network. These are networks that are relevant when reviewing images of other people's bodies. Alright, the study compared anorexia and body dysmorphic disorder and brain activation and connectivity and relevant networks when viewing images of others' bodies and tested their relationship with clinical symptoms and subjective appearance evaluations. The researchers hypothesized that AN and BDD would have abnormally low activation and connectivity in the dorsal visual network when viewing low spatial frequency images. The researchers predicted greater activation and connectivity in the striatal network when viewing normal spatial frequency images for both groups. This is compared with controls. In regard to the parietal network, they predicted abnormal activity and connectivity in both groups for NSF images. For low spatial frequency images, they hypothesized that low insight scores and the severity of symptoms would be associated with lower dorsal visual network activity and connectivity. Alright, methods. So the study consisted of having 64 female participants with ages ranging from 13 to 33. All of the participants were right-handed. The study had 20 weight-restored people with anorexia, 23 people with body dysmorphic disorder, and 21 healthy controls. All of the participants were recruited from the community and were matched for age and years of education. All participants underwent interviews. Also, participants were assessed by certified clinicians to establish diagnoses. The clinicians looked at illness duration and determined the age the participant first had clinically significant symptoms. Okay, so in regards to finding if low activation and connectivity in the dorsal visual network when viewing low spatial frequency images, the researchers used the Brown Assessment of Belief Scale, or BABS, which is a metric of insight, and they also used BDD, Yale-Brown Obsessive Compulsive Disorder Scale, which measures BDD symptom severity. To measure eating disorder severity, they used the Eating Disorders Examination, so EDE. Brain activation and connectivity data were recorded by an fMRI machine of the different participants in the different groups. A fMRI is a type of MRI that creates 3D images of the brain and highlights areas that are active. So the body's task. In the scanner, participants were asked to perform a task of matching photos of other people's bodies and as a control task matching shapes. The photos were black and white of other females or male bodies. The people in the images were wearing underwear and their heads were cropped out. The people varied in size from being average weight to being overweight. The photos were unaltered NSF or spatial frequency filtered to include only LSF and HSF. A target body and two selection bodies appeared on the screen simultaneously for 4 seconds. Participants were directed to press a right or a left button to choose a selection body that was identical to the target body. This was done to examine connectivity and activation of certain brain networks during the task. This is an example of what the participants would have seen to help you better understand this task. You can see all the different spatial frequency used. When it came to viewing low spatial frequency images, the participants with body dysmorphic disorder demonstrated lower activation in parts of the dorsal visual network compared to healthy controls. When compared to controls, AN did not have significant differences in this network when viewing these images. When compared to the anorexia nervosa participants, BDD demonstrated greater activation than AN for this network. When it came to connectivity for the dorsal visual network when viewing low spatial frequency images, when compared to controls, there was a greater connectivity in both AN and BDD. However, BDD did show greater connectivity in parts of this network, such as the right lateral occipital cortex and superior parietal lobe compared to AN. And what I've just said is shown in these graphics. When it came to activation and connectivity in the striatal network when viewing normal spatial frequency images, there were no significant differences among groups. It was found that there was lower activation in BDD than controls in the parietal network when viewing normal spatial frequency images. When AN was compared to controls, there was no significant differences in this network. However, BDD showed lower activation than AN in parts of this network. When compared to controls, it was found that both AN and BDD had greater connectivity in some parts of the parietal network when viewing normal spatial frequency images. However, I thought it was interesting that BDD showed lower connectivity compared to controls in other parts of this network, such as the right superior parietal lobule and the pre- and post-central gyri. AN showed greater connectivity than BDD in parts of the parietal network when viewing these images, and again, this is shown in the graphic. When viewing low spatial frequency images, multivariate analyses showed that abnormal activation and connectivity in the dorsal visual network had associations with poor insight and symptom severity for AN and BDD. This abnormal activity and connectivity could underlie disturbances in body perception and body disorders, and both disorders. Discussion. The hypothesis about low activation connectivity in the dorsal visual network for low detailed body images in the BDD group was correct. However, there was no significant low activation of this network in AN. This went against their prediction. This hypothesis was created based on similar studies finding low activation in BDD and visual symptoms for face perception. Also, the researchers' predictions were wrong. AN and BDD demonstrated greater connectivity than controls in the dorsal visual network. This hypothesis was also based on past studies about body processing. Also, the researchers incorrectly predicted that there would be greater activation and connectivity in the striatal network for both groups when viewing normal spatial frequency images. In reality, there were not significant differences. For the parietal network, when at normal spatial frequency images, AN and BDD showed similar abnormal and connectivity patterns. However, only BDD showed abnormal activation patterns. So what the researchers predicted was partially correct, and both groups showed abnormal connectivity in the parietal network. However, only one group showed abnormal activity patterns in this network, that being BDD. The hypothesis about low insight scores and symptom severity associated with abnormal dorsal visual network activity and connectivity was supported by the results. They also used this research and past research to support the idea about abnormal neural functioning in visual systems can cause disturbances in perception in both disorders. Limitations and future directions. The AN group was weight restored and analyses were limited to females in both groups, so the generalizability to underweight anorexic males is unclear since they were not included. Future studies would benefit from a larger sample size and including underweight AN participants in males. Future longitudinal studies might be beneficial if using the same cohort. Further research could take a more comprehensive and detailed understanding of body perception and processing. Conclusion. The importance of the study is that it identified unique neurophenotypes of these disorders. By identifying specific specific brain regions that differ in connectivity and activity compared to healthy controls, it would help in making new effective treatments for these disorders. Lastly, this research and research like this help to spread awareness about eating disorders and similar disorders. Thank you so much, and here are my sources.